And now, from 50 miles offshore, welcome to Caribbean Rhythms with Bronze Age Pervert. This my show is a return of Bronze Age thought. I will ask such question: did Antarctica have natives and what they look like? Do they still exist? Antarctica Aborigines. Expedition, I am told, found very small 4'8" humanoid, completely a black face under outfit or armor seemingly made of local woods, frozen in deep ice. This is one of topics that will interest me. Is fascism the future political system of the world, or is it national populism, as is now called? Will socialism triumph? Or is what we have now going to continue? Globalist human rights, corporate scatocracy for the next 40,000 years? Should homosexuals have to register with the city they live in as a public health matter, thereafter perhaps only live specific neighborhood, no more than 4 by 4 blocks and walled off, walled invert neighborhood? These are just some of the topics that we will deal with on this show. Are Kamala Harris and Barack Obama bioengineered in a CIA laboratory for high yellow house androids in Bermuda? Profound questions no one else dares touch, but I will broadcast for you from here, from my tropical fortress. You know, they say United States will soon just be a joyless version of Latin America, a kind of Colombia with bad weather. He said Brazil is the future, that America will be something like Brazil. But no, I think this far too optimistic. The natives and the human livestock in Brazil were quite sedated historically. You know, Brazil right now is white supremacist country. If you're a blonde white man, the mulatas, they go crazy for you, you know. Brazil, too good. America will be Colombia, or worse. Outhouse like Guatemala, where most of the very short Indios to United States now are coming from Central America. Place with persistent low-grade civil ethnic conflict and cold, grey North Atlantic weather. As for me, I'm broadcasting here poolside of coast of sunny Suriname. They will never find me, they can never shut me down. I'm here to bring you the real and tropical evergreen right wing, the Bronze Age thought out of time. But in United States, you can see this other called desiccated version of Latin America already in some of the drab northeastern states or in Rust Belt. You go old industrial town in Midwest or Rhode Island or such place, and you see all government offices there are run by sassy shibun or sassy African ladies with the proud anger of a medieval European noble. And an ass you could sit a can of coke on, Steatopigia, the scientific name, the true Panamanian ass, Yoruba tropical ass of a water priestess. You get on the wrong side and see worthy of a Prussian Junker. France says this, they're the last holdout of aristocratic wrath in our time. In Nietzsche, you see the same image, a Prussian Junker whose only hobby is getting drunk on potato liquor and beating the shit out of Polish peasants with a sword and yelling, only Shibun, chimp out in McDonald's, continues this noble attitude in our time. It's exactly the same. The joke is they run Department of Motor Vehicle, but in fact they run all the government. They staff many large company too and bring to it all the emotional corruption, the intensity of southern life where everything is personal. Everything is spite or family, tribal favor. By contrast, the Anglo mind, the Puritan, the Quaker, was obsessed with morality and law. What you otherwise call high-trust societies has constructions that came from the life of individual English landowner no longer exist. The English landowner, jealous of his independence and well-armed. The doctrine of rights, the ideas of Locke, the American Constitution, didn't just come at first from from principles, from words on piece of paper, but from a way of life. You go to North Carolina Outer Banks, or to Virginia, for example, where the first settlers came, and you see this life that was foundation of American rule of law, the fiercely independent landowner, armed to the teeth, litigious. This is difference, by the way, between so-called new right thinking, which is bad word, is not correct language, and the old exhausted conservatism, place you see like National Review, third-rate publications like that, which isn't real conservatism. We are real conservative. We pay attention, this is difference, to how life is actually lived, to the quality of the man and of the people, not just to intelligence agent approved ideological distinction held over from the Cold War. And from this settler colonialist way of life came careful rules, legal efficiency, openness and rectitude, but in the hands of the Shibun bureaucrat. These are just vehicles for personal feuds. These are ways to gain benefit. They understand nothing of the real meaning of the laws. The residues of impersonal Anglo-machine become a way to exert power over the humble, to exalt themselves. So if you are the humble, which is to say the normal citizen, some guy, you get banged from both ends. The regularity, efficiency, and ubiquity of Northern and Anglo-Yankee law, and the blind simian he has left behind and has made executor of these laws, which sees them as a path to the personal and the petty. This is why they charge me $900 parking ticket and tow my car, so they say for suspicion. And then when I go to complain, to plead my case, they find way to oppress me, to laugh in my face, because there's no way out. So then you see what I mean. Latin America, but cold, unforgiving, very efficient at making you miserable. By contrast, in the real South, the government is too incompetent to exert its power. So you have freedom by default in South America, in Indonesia, in Ukraine. You could at least have an out. You could bribe. You could ply them with American cigarette even during communism. Is not totalitarianism if you can get out of it with a path of stockings. But in the new America, in what I believe is to be known in the future as Cretino America, this super state, someone to arrive, that will stretch from Alaska to Chile and be populated completely by their Oaxacan serf class of 4'7" automatons with fetishes for scarification. Such people, against these volcanoes of personal will that run the efficient Western state, you have no out. You just have to hope they like you. And in this way, you know, the African ladies, I don't mean to say because they're hardly the worst. They're not the worst. Some of the African ladies, they like you. They become kind. They like cute white gentlemen, so say. They like blonde, or they like you use a kind of cologne, how you smell. There are others whose hearts are far more hardened. The pathic gaze, you know what pathic is an older word. They say poetic word for catamite. It's, you know, in modern language invented, you know, power bottom, they say. It's language invented by a Jewish academic, is beyond my IQ level. I don't understand what mean. I stick to this word pathic. But these are people who always feel aggrieved, always walk around with chip on shoulder, because they see being sexually penetrated as a social slight. And many single women, you know, in their 20s have the same meanness in public life to compensate for their weekly sessions. Modern women are faggots. Okay, if you can only get off by turning yourself into equivalent of a public bathroom glory hole, there's going to be someone you unload all that on in day-to-day life, unfortunately. That's why the pathic is so usually so cold and precious and cruel. It's what usually happens. People are like, this is why the Federal Reserve encourages all your daughters to do butt stuff with their butt. They need more hardened, merciless disc soldiers. They need automatons. These are hard-hearted people. In their spirits, the same kind of nurse ratchets who'd man Hadamar. You know what Hadamar is? A Nazi mental asylum. Everyone got executed who worked in it. Look it up. Look at the faces of the psychos who ran Hadamar and say you don't recognize them. But you see them every day now in government office, in NGO office, The black ladies at the department motor vehicle are far from the worst. They can be very kind sometimes. I recently had problem with a white girl. Oh my god, let me tell you, I ended up staying all night in car outside her window. You know, the liberal, holy school marm, white girl, always with face like savoring castor oil, like with fish in mouth, always distorted in look of disapproval, ferocious moral superiority. She was one of these washed out blondes with straw hair, blue-gray eyes. In her case, a false signal of youth, completely false. She was an old and dry ghoul in her inborn nature. Sometimes I like to drive after few whiskey. I see such creature on street. I lower window and yell out, white bitch. I say white bitch, just that kind of constipated look of moral narcissism. It makes you want to do it. But against my will, I became involved with her. Believe me, I resisted. She approached me at a very vulnerable time. It was the first time I felt truly poisoned. I believe they turned on some years ago a machine under New York Federal Reserve and are modulating my nervous system with it. I couldn't understand at time what was going on. She took advantage of me in this condition. I believe such girl is almost like a trained hunter. They see a limp in antelope on savanna. They start salivate. They get a little glint in the eye. There are girls like this, you know, they make a sport of hunting men they think are wounded. She pursued me like I've never seen before. I tried to ward her off. I tried to set her up with another autist to get rid of her. But she stuck like leech parasite. I'm not saying this, by the way, to brag. I didn't feel flattered at the time, and you wouldn't either. If you would not feel flattered if crazy is after you. I knew there must be something wrong. She claimed not to be on medication, but once you get to know her, it's that kind of girl, you know, just smells like a mental hospital. You can smell in her long stays in places like Shepherd Pratt. You know, oh, so literary, you know, they all allude, this kind of girl, to their stays in Shepherd Pratt or place like McLean. It's literary, you know, this kind of pretension. Well, you know, I mean to say it was more literary. Because the lack of glamour, of mystery in women is their most offensive quality. Everything else almost could be forgiven. I'm saying almost, in a mistress. If at least there was allure, if in eyes you saw profound dark lake of nature, if it reminded you of vital and eternal reality under everyday world. You see in eyes of Madonna, in Raphael paintings, this otherworldly soul, if I may talk of such things. Schopenhauer explains this. The look of grace in the eye, in images of Madonna, of Raphael with child. But there is filled with light. I don't mind darkness or this kind of thing, but let it at least be romantic. Let it be romantic, not the look of sports store lesbian selling you AstroTurf to load on back of pickup truck, someone up on transaction, you know, in our everyday world that increasingly resembles a constricted open-air asylum. You would need refuge in such a deep woman more than at any other time. You see contrast in this. Even if you go Indio girl from Amazon or something like that, you see a profound emptiness in the eyes, certain black mulatta girl also in the tropic. You see, they just want to discuss with you doing her nail. You know, they're doing her nails, they are going shopping. They can only think of this or of romance, and is extremely charming, a great reprieve. Romance can be the most frequent kind of refuge in our world. It could be. People hope for it anyway. It's the only magic that seems accessible to them. It is for this reason I always resented the spiritual matrons who have cursed me with their pursuits. I could withstand any betrayal, really, any insult, but not insult of being treated as if we are discussing grocery list. You know, in some countries there is a phrase, the face of a wife, to refer to this kind of humdrum woman, mostly to look the face of a wife, but in spirit, many attractive girls also have this. They are all beyond their years. They think of grocery list, of career path, but when you remember, let's say you were 15 or 16 and you remember the madness, the sleepless night and longing that could be a reprieve from the heaviness of our iron prison world, and they deny you this, you know, not by rejecting you, but even by pursuing you, by getting their hooks in you, and then being just their virago washerwoman selves. So, you know, I had to force myself to try to be with this girl. I went through all the motions to try to instigate the madness of passion in myself. The madness of passion. She lived by side of a highway. I thought it was very romantic and a dystopian kind. This was some ways outside of Philadelphia, a huge 8-laner kind of highway. If you know the rot in that part of United States in south of Philadelphia, she had been from a rich family, you know, but now very poor. It had affected her quite a bit, and very romantic conception, or, you know, literary conception of life. She lived with a slut roommate. I don't want to get the slut roommate now, but I didn't mind it. There is romance, I think, to filth and ugliness like that in rest stops. So I would park on emergency lane across highway and pretend to be at height of passion and stay up all night looking at her apartment. I got a burner phone, so I could pretend to be taken with a wild fancy for her. So I could feel like, you know, she asked me to do this. I never went through with many things she asked me to do, and even worse things I did. You know, I had a friend take a photo of her apartment building, and I sent this to her. She found it very charming. I did anything to mimic excitement of Romeo and Juliet passion, but nothing came of it anyway. I couldn't use it to inspire energy in myself. It was all so crushingly boring. You know, I was living at the time in my car. I was broke. I was completely broke living in my car. I wore pretty much same 1 or 2 Adidas track suit all the time. My car had been towed twice. Excuse me, they attack me now with mind wave. My car had been towed 2 times at least. Suspicion, they say, for unpaid parking ticket, for back seat was full of paper, book, clothes, discarded wrapper to the ceiling, a complete mess. You want autism? I'll have plenty autism for you on this show, but I think she was just one of these freakazoid girls, so aimless, pretentious, that she found all of this romantic. You know, we screwed in back seat of car in a track suit. You know, some of these girls, they just find this irresistible. Oh, the eccentric life, so poetic. But it was impossible to kindle any passion in myself for her. She got everything out of it. I got nothing. It's impossible to kindle energy and passion. No escape in such things. Absolutely no escape. But is not only in a romance that you find this horrible tedium. I am needled and harassed every day on the street in everyday life. Supposing we could solve the big political problems everyone complains about. Supposing you could achieve a demographic, I think so-called racists, the 4chan Zoomers, people misunderstand. The media adapts humorlessness as a strategy and pretends not to understand. Probably the memes about the alt-right and 4chan being non-white are true. The Anglo, at any rate, has hardly any taste for far-right politics. Now, the complaint has always been about de-civilization, and in the recent immigrant, in the non-white youth, the pain of de-civilization is felt even more. This is why Frog Twitter full of mulattoes. We love them. They hope for white supremacy, because to them is glamorous. What I mean to say is they get in some way the brunt of this incivility people complain about so much now. They can't insulate from growing incivility as well as the WASP Jew elite can. So you want to complain about Trump, but forget even the gangs of urban youth and such who are said to make some parts of town unsafe. I'm talking in day-to-day life. In nice part of town, walking in bars, in restaurant, there's nothing but aggression. Nothing but the most vicious social aggression. I went once into a Vietnamese shop for sandwich, and two ladies were there with a retard. I think it was their nephew, or I don't know, two old Viet ladies, and he stuck out his hand. I assume he had been jerking off just before, or who knows, I don't know. I don't want to shake that hand. They basically forced me into shaking his hand. They were on two sides, and my back was to refrigerator wall, and they had this passive, this aggressive smile on face, this kind of oriental, passive-aggressive social pressure, just smiled and bullied me into shaking his hand. I left there in a rage. I walked street in a rage that day. They had completely humiliated me. I pushed various needling faggot out of my way. I say, move, faggot. I was angry and worried all day about possible disease. But that's just special case even. Instead, lately, every day now, I'm oppressed by a more pedestrian outrage. Every day, the social outrage never ends. I pass by a local bar every day. I've lived in same place last 3 months. Very unusual for me. I move often. I'm hunted. But for 3 months now, in this place, I take short walk at night. So a bartender at a makeshift English pub here sees me basically every day. I think it's a matter of kindness and politeness to do a nod, to say hi, maybe something like. Sometimes I do stop and ask, what kind of girls go to bar and at what time. Maybe he's offended by this. I don't know, but maybe this offense, how? I don't know. Basically, he does not return nod anymore. And lately, he started to completely turn when I walk by so as not to acknowledge me. And this is act of extreme social aggression. It's an attempt to assert social supremacy, like a dog keeping its tail high in a pack. This is how I'm mistreated, and even worse. Mind you, I don't try to talk to him every day. I do it out of social duty, so it would be once every 2 weeks when I consider going in for drink. And, he absolutely chimp out, he freak out when I would ask him if foreign or local girls go there. I thought it was innocuous question, but he calls security on me. How dare he, This is aggression I must deal with almost every day. They just take themselves so seriously. It's a big problem. I was in a store recently, a fancy store selling fish and seafood, but was in a landlocked country with no exit to see a fancy fish market, and I see this elegant middle-aged woman, like a younger boomer with a scarf, but from generation that didn't understand this kind of lifestyle affectation, a very no-nonsense woman. She goes and she asks, so why do you sell foreign seafood, ocean fish, that you have to import and not the delicious local river fish and lake fish instead? So the guy who worked there, is this guy very precious, wearing a black, very fashionable black turtleneck, he answered, we have a different concept. It's a different concept, this kind a concept you hear is very self-important and precious. They learn this from watching this stuffed shirt, like Mario Batali, that spiritual female pig. It is a pleasure to watch this elegant woman just tear into this pretense and social aggression. And by the way, the so-called South California Valley or South California accent, some girls insist on using on you. And sometimes boys also use this accent. It's not a real accent. It's not an actual linguistic accent. It's also a form of social aggression. Never tolerate it. Such a state of things, such a state can drive men to ultimate measures. And I don't recommend this, what I am about to talk right now, for anyone. But I have to say, I started to think about recording this at the end of May. Around anniversary of death of Dominic Venner, time of year, I become always very pensive, very nostalgic for this man who is Dominic Venner. I know I lose most of you if I don't talk about Trump or about, half want me to do Trump probably all day. The other kind want this kind of so-called white nationalism that very dubious characters want us all to engage in online. They want us to be type to ask, well, if there's a black entertainment television, why can't there be a white entertainment television? If there's a BET, why can't there be a WET? A WET, just post this a million times on internet in small variation. Hope this will change the world. I knew very unstable women who did this on forums year in, year out. So-called national socialist mother or white nationalist trad wife. These are women usually posting from halfway house mental asylum on gallons of wine, cheap wine, drug, I don't know. If you're looking for that from this show, forget it. I will not do this. You have 1,000 others to do this for you. I am not white nationalist, never have been. I am a white supremacist, okay? Just like the liberals, liberal world order is a white supremacist ideology. And I am exactly the same, a little bit different, but exactly the same. I'm a liberal, okay? But who is Venner? He was member of the OAS, Organization of Secret Army, during Algerian civil war with France. This, by the way, was biggest case of ethnic cleansing that we know of after World War II. At least 1.5 million French were ethnically cleansed from Algeria. I don't want to hear any more nonsense about Israel. Okay, the Pied Noir, the French colonists in Algeria, had been there for 100 or 150 years. Far longer, by the way, than most of the Jews have been in Israel. The nonsense from ADL with connection to the land, but all European peoples who spread around the world had connection to the land. If you are a conservative, and if you support Israel, but do not support Dutch South Africa, or English Rhodesia, or French Algeria, you are a huge hypocrite. Or more likely you're a spineless toady. You don't even have choice in what you can say or what you can believe in your own head. Please, enough about Israel. Point out, if you have to engage with such people, that they're pussies, just if you have to, and leave them. Do not engage. But the French colonists, the Pied Noir, this, Algeria, was their land. It is their country. They and their father had been born in the cities that they had built. They all had to leave when France lost the war. By the way, America, the CIA, was helping the Arabs and the Muslims kick the French out. Oh yes, decolonization, which is this word, de-civilization. Same word. When you hear academic maroon talk about post-colonial this or that. No, they mean the return of the slum is what they want. But this could have never happened without American help. How did that work out? Look at Algeria today. Look at Kosovo today. Look at Africa without the Europeans. Dominic Venner, the writer, at the time was part of a secret militia that wanted to put a stop to all this, that wanted to fight for the French in Algeria to preserve their own country. His side lost. It happens, his side lost. They were betrayed by their own government. You can look, by the way, what's happening to you right now. You're being sold for trinkets by your leaders, just like Indian chief sold their people out for a bowl of oatmeal with sugar. You know, all the natives in Aborigines are addicted to sugar. But it seems to be the curse of this land, the Americas at least, that the leaders always sell out their own people, their whores. They sell them out for nothing. American politician, very easy to buy. Japanese businessman in 1980s said, you pay them $30,000, you take them for a flight in private plane, you give them a meal out, and you can have your way with them. They're cheaper than a prostitute. Prostitute has more honor than American politician. It's the curse of the Americas, you know. But Dominic Venner, he escaped death penalty, and then he became historian. You should read his books. He's a strong Nietzschean, like anyone worth reading after 1900. He lived a life of struggle. He was an intellectual soldier. And what I mean to tell you is, in May 21, 2013, Venner went to the Notre Dame during first Paris protests, and he shot himself. This was a samurai move. You know about seppuku or harakiri as way for a samurai to escape or to erase dishonor. You lose a war, you commit this. After World War II, Europeans who were in love with this ethos also did same. Karl Haushofer, he did this too. He was special man, completely special. He met men with green glove in Hong Kong. I'm not supposed to talk about this. He was thinker on geopolitics. We talk about him, Karl Haushofer, another time. But there is different kind of seppuku. There is very striking different kind of seppuku. Sometimes samurai would go to court and kill himself because he wanted to promote this or that policy, and he felt that his point would receive more oomph if he offed himself in public. You saw the same thing in Vietnam. The monks would just burn themselves to protest the fact that Vietnam did not have a Buddhist government. You know, Mishima did the same thing, and I suppose you could say it's easier to do when you have belief in reincarnation. But I don't know if Dominic Venner really believes this. He might just have been a strong Nietzschean nihilist, life-affirming nihilist, like all of us on 4chan revolution since his time. And he was throwing it in the face of the faggots who run the European Union. He was saying, we will not surrender. We are still here. We will always be here. You can't get rid of us. And I think he chose this time to do it because you don't remember this. You know, there were uprisings against globalism before us, before Trump. The first real ones took place in France. During May of 2013, the French came out in the streets, and it was basically like yellow vests, but times 20, but better. They were protesting the gay marriage law that had been imposed on France by judges at the time. This, in any case, was the catalyst. You understand, for all that the intellectually exhausted American conservatives make fun of the French fight. They fought in the 50s and the 60s for their empire, unlike, by the way, most other Euro powers, and they fight now. They came out in the streets and they burned the city down to stop gay marriage from being imposed by the gay gangster judges in black robes. Did you see that happen, by the way, when the extreme court of the United States imposed catamite marriage on the country? No, the weak conservatives did nothing. They submitted. They took it like any catamite. There is your conservative movement. There are your principles, there are your values. All this pretentious talk, it means nothing. They took it like any catamite, dominated by Geffen. America was dominated by Geffen Geffen, Katzenberg, and Spielberg, Hollywood pedophiles, imposed the mulatto catamite Obama on America, with help of CIA, a guy who was a male whore in Chicago bathhouses, and Marco Rubio. Many other politicians have similar history. This is America. This is what the conservatives just took. They had Obama inflicted on the country and took it lying down, and then they had Catamite marriage inflicted. But by contrast, the French, the people they call freedom fries French, the people they call cheese surrender monkeys, they came out in streets in full force and they shut down the city. French boomers, French youth united to preserve their nation and traditions. They picketed, even the restaurants owned by the French Soros, the oligarch equivalent, the oligarch French equivalent of Soros, who was pushing the gay marriage law. They pelted his businesses. They displayed tremendous bravery. They went head to head with the police. And by the way, you must know, now in the West, the police are basically just the Hessians. They are mercenaries. They are the Basiji militia of the criminal gay globalist regime. These French, that's the American half and half conservatives, pretend to look down on. Never forget, they went all out, inspired by Dominic Venner. Are we back from break yet? I get my Chinaman to make me hot tea. Have you seen Pink Panther movie? It's one of best fight scenes between Peter Sellers and his Chinaman. Amazing scene. This is one of the only kind of servant you should have, by the way. A servant that keeps you on your toes, that seeks fight you in bathroom, you arrive home, fight you in corridor. That poisons you in your own kitchen. This kind of servant I want. Anyway, as bad as Europe may now be demographically, America is 10 times worse. So all the worst projections for Europe don't reach the level of civilizational death that United States is already at. I'm not talking in 40 years. Right now, most of Europe is still 85%, 90%, you could say white, but I mean their own nationality. You go to Holland, it's maybe a little bit less than that in Holland, but in most countries, it's 90% Danish or more. Something like this, whereas in the United States, they say white people are now 69% white, something like that, 65%. But in fact, that only counts if you include Albanian, Guatemalan, something like this, 56% mix, who are hardly on your side. Actual white people, I think, are already below 50% in United States. And the statistics are made up. So conservative griping at European demographics, at French demographics, at so-called no-go zones in French cities, is just a displacement, a projection, anxiety at not having to face their own situation. It is anxiety at not being able even to talk about their situation. America lost its inner cities a long time ago. You think there are no-go zones in Los Angeles, in Chicago, Detroit, New York? Please, why don't you complain about the French some more? Dominic Venner chose the Notre Dame, a place of ancient sacred significance. He says in his death note, a cultic site far older even than Christianity, of immense significance to the French people. He chose this place for his martyrdom, because he wanted to remind people and the youth rioting that protesting gay marriage is fine, But the matter to focus on, above all, is a refugee problem, so-called the immigrants, the forced migrations into Europe, the globalist plan to replace the ancient peoples of Europe. He reminded people that this issue is more fundamental. It must come before moral and theological matters like gay marriage. Because if they can replace you, they can replace any religion, any morality, any ideal. That is what matters. This is why religious men like Cardinal Sarah or religious men like the Dalai Lama strongly oppose the globalist plan of population replacement through mass migration, because they know if you give this kind of power to government, they can do anything they want to your religion. So think twice, even if you are, let's say, a religious man who pretends not to be nationalist or takes pride in not caring about race. A government that can replace a people racially or nationally, in terms of nationality even. That government can easily destroy your religion as well. And in fact, it is doing so. I see many people don't understand this. Gay marriage itself is imposed from above by force, merely to humiliate and degrade the families of Europe, and in particular the men of Europe. I see many young people on the right. They wouldn't mind gay marriage or gay rights, but they see now it's just something weaponized to try to humiliate straight, normal men, to disarm them. So they reject it. I think Dominic Venner inspired many. This is, start of New Right, so-called New Right. The start of 4chan revolution, which is probably most important event since, I would say, perhaps 1950s, for sure. It's far more important than the fake boomer revolution of the 1960s. The 4chan revolution of vital nihilism is the great awakening of Western news. It's start of covert and anonymous movements that realize the scam, that their lives and communities are being destroyed by literally a gangster international clique that says usurped power in the West. And in this sense, Venner's sacrifice, the start of all these motions, his actions were also a reminder to the gangsters themselves. They were a reminder to the enemy. Don't think they didn't see its meaning. Even if you didn't at the time, they did. They had been how should I put this, to remind you of their mindset in, let's say, before his death even, in 2010, in 2012, at the beginning of Obama's disastrous second term. They had been high on 2 decades or so of propaganda about end of history. Men like Fukuyama, Mike Ignatieff, Rawls, all their court thinkers declaring with confidence the final and world historical victory of neoliberalism. But now, in 2013, during these unexpected protests in France, they see Venner, Dominic Venner, this man out of time, this voice they thought had long been suppressed. They see him make a spectacle in the Notre Dame in the most shocking and flamboyant way possible, and they see the youth who they thought had been on their side, or at least who they use as part of their advertising strategy for the global liberal regime. This fake cult of youth, in which, by the way, they actually sacrifice the youth. They sacrifice their futures, they sacrifice their bodies in wars, and I assume we will find out soon they sacrifice their bodies in other ways also. But they see the most virile and energetic youth inspired by this image of this old man, Dominic Venner, and I think they shat. I think they shat themselves, and they shake with fear every day. They shit themselves seeing you and what you've become, believe me. Every time a Trump, an Orban, a Salvini, or a Bolsonaro wins, they shit themselves. They realize we are here. We are not going anywhere. We are here to stay, and we will win. In either case, we will fight. We will never surrender, never apologize. Remember, your opponents are ultimately the castrated, the neutered in body and spirit. The earth has no use for them, and nature is about to vomit them out like refuse. nature often starts these purgations of the superfluous, and it makes its agents certain men who you wouldn't have thought. There are men that nature chooses to become its garbage men. You could say it knights these men as its groundskeepers, as its park rangers. Please understand. Why do they have a love affair with lobster? The garbage of nature, the refuse. Just look, for example, at Macron, the so-called leader of France, the character out of a Kafka nightmare, installed by Goldman Sachs Lavender Mafia as head marionette of France. Inspector Clouseau, or a face like a Fall Guy out of old French cop comedy, role-playing as Napoleon with no self-awareness whatsoever of his insane comic grandiosity, who flaunts his sexual weirdness in public. The guy is an obvious sadomasochistic sub-sissy for his wife and that Arab bodyguard Benalla. What is it with lobster and our irredeemably provincial elite? John Podesta, the pedophile master, was taunting Assange, one of only genuine journalists alive, Julian Assange. He was taunting him with lobster risotto. He couldn't get it in Ecuadorian embassy, Podesta said. Apparently to Podesta, this is a great luxury, He's not realizing how much he reveals his plebeian tastes, eating this slop that restaurants or his weird caterers put together from scraps in the garbage bin. This what they do with risotto they make with leftovers. They're obsessed with lobster. One of Macron's ministers had to resign recently, a week or two ago, because he was found throwing parties at public expense with overpriced champagne and lobster feasts and every other taste elevated by middlebrow trends. Just like the transsexual Michelle Obama and her obsession with short rib. Look at White House menus during that time. Some backwoods tastes spruced up. The Rothschilds and others you've never heard of before have all these creatures, it seems, on a leash. It's like they release these super ambitious conformist country bumpkins with insatiable appetite for status and polymorphous perversion. The Rothschilds just release them like cockroaches in the capitals. Macron, this guy, see who he is married to. Look into that story. They've been grooming him since high school. Literally, like pedo grooming. The guy, he was seduced by this woman who was 25 years older than him, a teacher supposedly at a private school where the lords of lice and perverts like her to identify their fresh meat. He's married to her now, an old reptilian twice his age who has the 1,000-yard SSRI or methamphetamine stare. The SSRI, antidepressant stare and bulged out eyes. She's bulging eyes. She's his handler or pegger or who knows. She pegs him. She's been running him since he was 17. It's come out in leaked emails. The guy is high up on crystal meth poppers. There's a steady flow of chemsex drugs to him. And part of this, he's kind of a tight-knit group of distinguished men in French government and media who are very much into Arab men. Okay? If you don't believe me, look at the details of the so-called Benalla affair, this bodyguard boyfriend of Macron that this horse-faced weirdo just kept doing insane favors for him and promoting him extra-legally until it became a scandal, it got exposed. This is the darling and savior of the global liberal world order, Their mouth fills when they say this. This is your elite. The meth-addicted, methamphetamine-addicted, sadomasochistic sub of some crazed witch proxy for a banking cartel she looks like she came out of the darkest parts of a David Lynch lunatic surreal fantasy. Do you understand why they freaked out when they were called cuckolds? Just come out, Macron. Just come out, declare your love for the homosexuals, declare your love for African men, Macron. Let the people of France see what they've become. Let the denatured upper middle classes of the West look to him, or to the spinster of Germany, Merkel, who's lately she's got the kuru shakes, and just let the middle classes, the so-called college-educated retards, see what they become. You read old poem, and you remember the words, "Is for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them." Your people in the midst of you are women. So it was, and so judgment of nature will come on France and Europe. I call on sober men left in French military and the French people to rise up and depose the tyrant Macron. Overthrow government. Revolution.